Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 elections continues. We're interviewing State Representative Bob Kulp of Stratford. He's a Republican. He's seeking re-election in the 69th Assembly District. Bob, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
It's good to be back, and I appreciate this time that you're making for me.
Well, thank you. Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Well, you were elected in a special election late last year.
I was.
So then you were around for not as long as everybody else. But let me ask you this. You've obviously got a feel for how the Assembly works. Mm-hmm. What area do you think you can have an impact and will focus on in the next session, Bob, if you're reelected?
And that's an excellent question. There are a lot of places. Of course, the state government's breadth and width of what it covers is huge. And as we talked before we went on air, I've got an insatiable curiosity, so I've been asking a lot of questions about a lot of different things. But I'd like to think that as a small business owner and employing 45 employees, I haven't done the tally, but I think that's as many employees as probably anybody in the Assembly or the Senate has, which puts me potentially in a unique position to be able to speak to job creation, what works, what doesn't work, and bring those ideas to the table.
If you could wave a wand, what bill would you pass, changes in the tax code, to help small businesses such as yourself, sir?
I would wave the magic wand about personal property tax. I'm actually on a personal property tax symposium. And of course, as you know, manufacturing and ag, as well as computers, were exempted many years ago and phased out. I believe that if we were to eliminate personal property tax for other small businesses, the growth potential for the state would be huge. In fact, in talking to a legislator from Minnesota that is on the other side of the aisle from me about a month and a half ago, when I said we still have personal property tax, she said without hesitation, get rid of it. And I believe that that's something that the immediate benefits would be seen. Now, there are challenges in doing that because you have municipalities who are depending on that. So yes, we're working through
that
those issues.
That would cost them revenue, excuse me.
It could cost them revenue. Obviously, we would not do that without making sure that they would be made whole, because municipalities, villages, towns are depending on that, and rightly so. So there would need to be ways to change that. But my first day in office, actually, or first week in office, I had Bob Lang from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau over just to ask him what the impacts of that would be to the other taxpayers in the state. I got some really good answers, and there's still a lot of questions that I have, so I'm digging into that.
Just a follow-up question on that. Would that involve tax shifting from the owners of small business, from the owners of businesses to homeowners and commercial property owners? Would they have to make up if you abolish the property tax?
I don't know that I'm going to necessarily be the only person. I know I'm not going to be the only person deciding that. That would not be the ideal methodology. It would affect, if you did that, it would affect other people's taxes by about 2%. So if you're paying $1,000, it would go up by $20. The chance that that would actually fly in the legislature or with the governor would be fairly minimal. So there are other ways of making that a reality. And if you think about it, back in 1848, when personal property tax was put in place, mm-hmm, everybody paid. If you had a boat, which we know boats back in 1848 weren't what they are today, but you paid on absolutely every personal belonging. Personal belongings for non-businesses were phased out many, many decades ago. So this would really just put industry, other than manufacturing and ag, which are already exempted, on the same playing field as other people in the state have been for many decades. Okay. So I think it's something that's a vestige of a bygone era that needs to really carefully be looked at, making sure that others are made whole along the way.
Okay, let's talk about other issues that are going to emerge if you're reelected. Let's talk about public school funding. You represent a lot of rural districts.
I sure do.
Do we need a new school aid formula or a new way to help rural school districts, Bob?
And absolutely, and I would have to ask you this: how many decades has that been talked about, and unsuccessfully?
I'm glad you used the term plural, decades. Yes, sir. Several.
And that's the issue, that it will be a difficult thing to do, but there's no doubt that schools in my district and others in rural Wisconsin are disadvantaged by the way the current school aid formula is put together. I believe beyond that, if we look at school funding formulas in a flexible and innovative way, potentially we can have some. We're phenomenal schools. I mean, in our district, Marshfield School District is one of the best in the state. We certainly need to do some very serious looking at that. The issues are very complex, though, as the further we get into it.
Yep. Part of the issues that travels with public school funding is choice and vouchers. Mm-hmm. Do you support eliminating the 1,000 student enrollment cap on outstate vouchers?
I believe that school choice probably doesn't affect my district as much as it does some others.
Okay.
In fact, it might actually be good for my district if that cap were eliminated, because then it costs less in Milwaukee, say, for a student to go to a voucher school or an opportunity scholarship school, as I prefer to call them, than it does to send them to the public schools, which means that there'll be more money for the rest of the state. Mm-hmm. Again, we have great schools in our district, but I believe in order to prepare the most competitive kids for a competitive environment, we need to be really thinking outside the box. There are any number of things relative to schools that I've been dialoguing with superintendents, teachers, everybody about, trying to get a lot more data on it. I know a lot more than I did 6-8 months ago when I took this position, but there's still a lot more to learn. And I think in being in business as I am, making quick decisions isn't something that small business people do, because their lives and their livelihoods depend on it. And now that responsibility is ever so much greater because of the position that I have in the assembly. So a careful, thoughtful approach to this will, I think, win the day, and good debate on both sides.
What are they telling you as you talk to principals and teachers and school administrators about Governor Walker's call to repeal the Common Core standards?
And I've had very interesting discussions, not so much with superintendents and school administrators relative to that, but with the news media in my market. And I guess I don't know exactly what is in the governor's mind, and I certainly wouldn't pretend to be there. I believe that along with the governor, we can do better. Does that mean radically shifting from where we are with all of the money and time and effort and training that school districts have put into it? Again, these are very complex issues that need to be thought about very carefully. That being said, I did sign on to the SB 619 and AB 617, which was to not repeal Common Core, but to develop our own set of standards. Again, these things take time, and I certainly will be interested in the debate. Again, I'm not incredibly up on education, but I do have my 2 daughters and my wife are teachers, so this is something that, again, is very important.
Okay. Transportation funding. The Taxpayers Alliance said if we continue to fund statewide transportation programs at 2013 levels for the next 10 years, we're going to be $2 billion short. Do you think there is a deficit, and if so, how would you fix it?
On the transportation budget, there definitely is a shortfall of where we need to be. There's any number of things that I've been looking at. I had the transportation investment management people, the people that manage the budget for transportation in my office, to ask not only about the revenue side, but also about the cost side, just to see if there could be some potential shifting of things that are currently in transportation out of transportation, as well as just looking at, what did we do? What did we learn from the past? If you go back to 2005, 2006, it was pretty much a bipartisan thing to to stop the indexing of the gas tax.
The annual adjustment for inflation.
And the people looking back at that, at stopping that, back then said that we were going to run into this situation. So we saw this coming down the road. That, along with the fact that over the years there was money taken out of the transportation fund, that's a worrisome thing. With the referendum on the state ballot this fall to put a lockbox on that, I believe we're a long ways toward protecting that. there are very, very hard choices that need to be made. And I don't think that out of the 6 or 7 ways that we can fund transportation, we currently fund transportation, any one of them will necessarily bear the brunt. But I do believe we need to make sure that we not only have the cost side nailed down and make sure that we're getting the best bang for the buck and the most road for the dollars, but we also need to look at what can we do. I'm personally in favor of a use tax, which would turn into a sales tax if we need to do that. But again, we need to secure that the money that we are putting in there will stay in there.
Okay. On health care, as you know, 1 in 5 Wisconsin residents get their health care through the Medicaid program. Mm-hmm. The American Hospital Association says Wisconsin's reimbursement rates for Medicaid are the second lowest in the nation. Mm-hmm. Have you studied that issue? Do you think they need to be raised?
I have studied that extensively, and it makes me very unhappy that, again, this is a federal issue you're asking about. It's not something we can do at the state level other than lobby Washington, D.C. to change this. But when I look at Minnesota having 130% of their costs are covered by Medicare, Medicaid dollars coming in, and only 70% of our costs are, that puts us at a huge disadvantage for the rest of our entire healthcare system. It's also one of the reasons why it's not fair to compare Minnesota to Wisconsin relative to payments for insurance. The playing field starts out incredibly unlevel. And also one of the other reasons why I believe that whenever you involve federal dollars in anything, you end up being at the mercy of what the federal government decides. So can we do something about that at the state level? This is a 40-year-old problem, and it's not going to go away in one session of the Assembly and Senate, no matter how diligent they want to be, because it's not a state issue, it's a federal issue.
There will be a bill introduced next session to legalize medical marijuana. Traveling with that is the experience in Colorado, state of Washington for recreational use. Your position on those bills?
Well, first off, we did pass the CBD oil law, which was to allow CBD oil without the THC to be used for seizures and for people that, for children especially. And I believe that was a successful vote, and I did vote for that. The recreational use of marijuana, I guess, let me just tell you that I've got roofing contractor friends, because I'm a roofing contractor, who do business in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And they've told me that it's not the end of the world from their workforce perspective, and that it's bringing some money into the state coffers. But last fall, I don't know if I said in an interview with you or someone else that the answer was unequivocally no. I still haven't changed my opinion on that. I believe that to open the door to that would be a potential gateway to other drugs, and we do have a huge drug epidemic in the counties that I represent and in my district. And I've been to numerous meetings about that, and the concern always comes up from Western Marathon County healthy communities. Do not, in any case, legalize marijuana, is what they say.
Okay. I want to ask you about frac sand is an issue in your district, isn't it?
It is.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, do we have the balance of who regulates these frac sand mining operations right? Do local governments need more power, or do we need a state preemption law?
First off, you said frac sand. I prefer to use industrial sand, and if we, as you know, it's been mined for decades. Yes. in central Wisconsin. The need for energy independence, of course, is absolute, and we are getting more and more independent because of the frac sand. So we have not just a very local issue, we have a national issue at stake. That all being said, I am very much a proponent of allowing local towns and municipalities to make decisions. And I believe that there will be a bill introduced next year that will be modified from the one it was before. Okay. I, of course, haven't looked at that yet. But let's not forget the overriding thing that this is a huge jobs creator. And if we know that the health risks aren't there, plus the fact that there's a misconception. Some people think that they're going to dig these great big holes and not put anything back. That is simply not true, because you're going to end up having beautiful parks and lakes and those kinds of tourist attractions, if you will, in place of, or wild habitats. in place of where you had just a field before. The myth that energy and the environment is, pardon me, that environment and industry is at counter positions is also a myth. We really can find a way to do both together, but local control is certainly very critical.
Okay, almost out of time, so two more questions quickly. Drunken driving, first offense, should be a crime?
I do not believe it should be.
Okay, then finally I want to give you a chance to highlight any differences between you and your opponent in the November 4 election.
And I choose to use the word competitor versus opponent because and honestly, I have not met my competitor. I look forward to the time when I do and have a dialogue. I don't know what his positions are. But I believe what is unique about a small business person in the Assembly is that by nature, we have to have an intellectual curiosity and an intellectual honesty and a careful, thoughtful, methodical approach to any changes. Our livelihoods depend on it in small business, and I realize at the state level, many other livelihoods depend on careful, methodical approach. We can't just do knee-jerk reactions. So that, as I said last time, if I'm reelected, I intend to serve with honor, dignity, and respect, and adding to that intellectual curiosity and intellectual honesty.
Thank you. State Representative Bob Kulp of Stratford is a Republican seeking re-election in the 69th Assembly District. Bob, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
It's my pleasure again, Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks.